name is Joel and I represent Christos MarThoma Church Virar. I would like to speak to you about a theme, deserters and true believers. For this, I would like to turn our Bibles to John chapter 6 verses 60 to 70. It says,
On hearing it, many of his disciples said, This is a hard teaching, who can accept it? Aware that his disciples were grumbling about this, Jesus said to them, Does this offend you? Then, what if you see the Son of Man ascend to where he was before? The Spirit gives life, the flesh counts for nothing. The word I have spoken to you, they are full of spirit and life. Yet there are some of you who do not believe. For Jesus had known from the beginning which of them did not believe and who would betray him. He went on to say, This is why I tell you that no one can come to me unless the Father has enabled them. From the time many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. You do not want to leave too, do you? Jesus asked the disciples. Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and to know that you are the Holy One of God. Then Jesus replied, Have I not chosen you, the 12? Yet one of you is a devil. In John 6, 60-70, we see how the crowds responded to this bread of life message that Jesus delivered. Remember, we are dealing with many people who had followed Jesus for quite some time. These people had been enthusiastic about his teachings in the past. They had heard teachings like the Sermon on the Mount, and they had come hungering and thirsting for more. When they heard Jesus telling them how helpless they were to come to the Father, it wasn't anything they could do, but about the work of the Father within. Here we see there are two responses from this crowd of followers. Some deserted Jesus, but true believers stayed with him even when it got tough. We notice that deserters grumble, but true believers trust. In verses 60 to 61, on hearing it, many of his disciples said, This is a hard teaching, who can accept it? Aware that his disciples were grumbling about this, the first question we should have is, what is this hard teaching? Well, it's everything we have seen in chapter 6. It's the truth that Jesus and Jesus alone is what satisfies. And it's that we do not earn our way into God's good graces, but that God grants them by his good pleasure. Our social status, heritage, or good works do nothing to enhance our status before God. Next, we need to ask, why is this a hard teaching? For the original audience, this was a hard teaching because they had already risked a lot to go out to the desert to hear Jesus. It was hard because they were longing for a political Messiah who would restore the good fortunes of Israel. It was hard because deep down they liked being special, and they had begun to think that they deserved it. Why is it hard for us today? It is hard because we like control. We have the idea that with enough hard work and elbow grease, God will have to accept me. It is hard because we define good as being nice rather than as obeying God's law. It's easy to be nice, but it's difficult to be good. Deserters grumble while true believers trust. Deserters rely on themselves while true believers rely on Jesus. Finally, deserts start strong, true believers finish strong. Notice that all the people who left were considered disciples. They followed Jesus, but when things didn't go the way they expected, they left. But the 11 of the 12 remained faithful. These were men who would go on to be martyred for the faith. And then verses 70 and 71 reminds us about Judas. Of the 12, only he would later desert. This lets us know that deserters don't all desert at the same time. Some wait longer and actually become traitors. All throughout history, we see this pattern of starting strong and deserting later. King Saul started well, delivering the Israelites from the Philistines, but he thought that his way of doing things was better than God's, so he slipped into insanity and ultimately died with his kingdom in ruins. Joseph Stalin started out studying to be a priest, a good beginning, but he turned from that to become one of the most ruthless dictators history has ever seen. As he lay on his deathbed, he took a great final gasp, raised a clenched fist to heaven, and collapsed. A good start doesn't guarantee a good finish. But the rest of the 12 disciples finished well. They carried the gospel around the Mediterranean. They witnessed the resurrection. They saw the tongues of fire at Pentecost. They watched as the church grew throughout the Roman Empire. They paid the price of martyrdom for the faith. As a result, their legacy lives on in church today. They finished well. Most of us call ourselves believers, but are we really believers? Yes, we are by birth, that is true, but are we by our actions? So, during these last days of the Lent, I would like to leave you with just one question. Are you a deserter or a true believer?